Was industrial design something that you knew, during high school that you wanted to do? Because it's a pretty niche profession, I feel like.
Yeah, it's something that I discovered actually on my visit to Purdue University's campus. I thought what I do daily was engineering. So I went thinking I wanted to be an engineer, and as a backup, I put industrial design because the description sounded interesting. It sounded a little bit of a collision of the analytical side and creative side. And then I got into the meeting, and I remember as they were talking about what industrial designers do and the creative problem-solving process that they use and that they teach there. I remember looking at my mom, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So I actually didn't know about industrial design really until that meeting on campus. And it's absolutely what I thought I would be doing. It's even more rewarding and fun than I ever imagined too.
So did you end up entering as an engineer then transferring, or did you switched immediately before even applying?
No, I went straight into the School of Industrial Design. I like the process of, engineering and the analytical side of that. But to me, I'm a lot more creative. Mm-hmm. So I like having a little bit of both. And Purdue's teachers, their whole program is about product design. So it's about design for manufacturing, design for the real world, design for consumers. So you use a lot of engineering principles, and you work a little bit with the engineering program, but it's very much set in the world of designing for people, which is really what drew me into that field.
Interesting. Is that like a 4-year program?
Yeah, I took 5 years. I took you can add an additional year so you can do a work study program. So it is a 4-year program, but they highly encourage doing a co-op program. So I worked actually for Delta Faucet Company for on and off for 2 years during my schooling, which gave me some real world experience. It made school quite a bit different too. Getting out into the real world when you're young, it was really opened my eyes to aligning with what they're teaching us versus what it's like in the real world, and kind of the collision of those two discovery processes early in my career was really integral to developing me as a designer.
Is that because of feasibility primarily? I feel like in school sometimes students design really wacky things, which can be great. I think you need to do that sometimes, right? But
I think it's a little bit of both. So the Purdue program does a ton of work with actual companies. So and Delta Faucet Company teaches a class up there. So you go through a process of working with a design team in the real world, solving a real world problem. And it teaches you a lot of how to kind of rein in some of those blue sky ideas and how to bring them to reality. So I think I was taught a really good mix of both. So there's a lot of art background, obviously, with industrial design and at Purdue, but then that bringing it into reality and how can you be creative within constraints of real world manufacturing and processes like that. So that to me was what drew me in.
I had the same question for Judd, I think, which was, industrial design is the design of, you could probably describe it better than me, but the design of objects and of products and things like that, right? And how did you end up knowing that you're going to be designing faucets? Because again, I feel like that's maybe not, maybe not the first thing most people would think of. They would think of designing, I think cars is probably the first thing that a lot of people think about, right?
It's usually cars or shoes.
Yeah, shoes.
Yeah, to be honest, Delta came, it was actually Judd that came and pitched the co-op program to all of our class. And I remember just thinking, wow, that sounds like a really great idea. I'm born and raised in Indiana. Delta Faucet Company and Brizo are headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana. So I was like, hey, that's a good way to get some real world experience. Designing. Judd pitched it as this really great creative outlet. And he said, and I still use this a lot when I talk about our jobs, but he said something that really resonated with me is he said, we get to work with water, one of the most precious resources on the planet, and you get to design things that everyone on the planet has to interact with every day. So if you really think about that, if you don't have access to water, you really need access to water. So a way that you can get water is integral to your life. If you are lucky enough to have constant access to water, like myself, how can we enhance that experience? How can we make it enjoyable, or make a shower awesome or whatever. And as a student, I was just like, oh wow, I never thought about faucets from that perspective, and it hooked me. For that unique perspective, but two, for his passion for what he does. And you'll find that with the entire design team, is that passion just for creating things and having an impact on everybody's daily lives is really what drives us.
That's very fascinating. And I do recall now when we spoke with Judd, he's a very good speaker, and he convinced us. We were like, we'll go to Judd's and apply to work
with you guys. Quit architecture.
Because it does sound like, and we'll get into, I think, the process a bit, but it does sound like you guys are having a lot of fun with what you do.
Yeah, I think that's key to our team. We are involved from the inception all the way to production of these products. So you have to have really thick skin, but you also have to have a passion for what we do. I mean, you really have to enjoy creatively solving problems. And some of those problems aren't easy to find or easily defined, right? You can't ask somebody, hey, how can we make your shower better? Well, the answer is probably going to be, I don't know, more water. Well, water is a precious resource. We can't just keep pumping more water into the shower. So it poses unique challenges every day. And that energy, that excitement, that desire to be better every day at our craft is what drives us all.
So you've been with Brizo from the very beginning, right? And how long has Brizo been around? Remind us.
About 12 years.
Okay. And you were there from the very beginning. And I'm curious how the company has evolved through that time, and also about your current title, which is Design Future Manager, which is a pretty slick title.
Right? Yeah, I get that comment a lot. Well, I'll start with Brizo. I still remember when I was very early in my career, I remember Judd designing. He had a few faucets up on his screen that he was designing in 3D or in 3D software, and they were like nothing I had seen before. Again, I was early in my career, but I had still studied faucets quite a bit, and just like, wow, I have never seen anything like this. And it was the very first couple designs for Brizo. And I remember Judd talking to me about it. It wasn't just like, hey, here's this cool faucet I'm working on. He had a whole story about the development, about his inspiration behind it, about it was a dying tulip flower, which was Floriano, which was one of the very first models. And as he was telling it, I could feel the passion for what he was doing. And I was just like, well, I could see the beauty and I could hear the passion in his voice. And then I was like, oh, Brizo is going to be something special, and yes, it is a faucet, but it's so much more than that. We try to focus on that, fashion, living fashion, right? It's fashion for the home. And I can remember in its early stages, it was quite literal. The very initial ad campaign was, a fashion designer had designed some prints for us, and they were very bold and very beautiful. And then it very quickly evolved into actual living fashion with the collaboration with Jason Wu and bringing in some of his influences. And then it became, fashion for the home. So not only is it a striking piece, all of these faucets, not only are they striking in your home, but they become pieces that you want to show people, and they become aspirational. And as we continue to evolve the design of that brand, it continues to be a challenge and discovery process that is really unique. And it's what makes that brand really special. It's been awesome to watch it evolve, because it's just everybody that's involved on the Brizo brand is so passionate and so caring. And I'm talking about, the engineers, the people on the production lines, the designers, the sales, the marketing, they all have that unique perspective and that desire to be better and really push that brand forward.
What's interesting from what you just said is that it sounds like from the early days, from the beginning, perhaps, this idea of fashion was integral and part of the Brizo brand, right? But what's interesting is kind of how you guys view that statement from different angles, and it's allowed the company and the design principles and what you're producing to evolve and grow with time. It's not like fixed, even though there's a focus. It's not fixed or stagnant.
Yeah, and I think the acknowledgement of that early on was that, hey, this isn't going to be this forever. It's going to change over time as we mature, as we discover new technologies, as we discover new processes, as we pay very close attention to our end users as they evolve. We want to evolve with them. The pillars, artful craftsmanship is something that I've always found really, really fun, because it's every single detail matters. If you talk to an engineer about a really complex component, there's no pushback of like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. It's all right, how can we solve this? And I think as that's evolved, everybody seems to understand that and get on board with that. It's really unique to be a part of. And I think as a design team, as we evolve and we understand that that's critical to our growth and to our success, it becomes even more enjoyable to work for Brizo.
So you had mentioned probably one of the most well-known collaborations, which was with Jason Wu. And I know your most recent line, which we talked to Judd about, was the Frank Lloyd Wright line. But I'm wondering, like, what were some of the other collaborations or other, I don't know how you describe them, lines that you guys came up with that were influenced by external things?
Well, pretty much everything in the Brizo line has some kind of inspiration built off of it from something our designers have experienced, whether it's through travel or whether it's through just personal discovery. The Jason Wu collaboration has been something I've been really fortunate to be involved with since the very inception. His process is very much like our design process. And he cares deeply about everything he does. So it makes us even more passionate to work for him. Back in 2008, we launched the Jason Wu for Brizo lavatory collection, or the bathroom collection, which was this beautiful, simple geometry, but we introduced matte black. Now, matte black today sounds, oh yeah, matte black's everywhere. Well, in 2008, it wasn't. And it was definitely something that was a risk, but it was something that Jason felt very confident in, and with his support and our backing, and then paired with a really, really beautiful design product line, it became very successful. The first year it was slow, but then it became almost the main stay in Brizo, and it's one of our most successful product lines. So much so that last year we continued that collaboration with him with the Jason Wu for Brizo kitchen collection, which we introduced a matte white. And that was, he sees it as, it's just the involved. You had the matte black in the lavatory, and now you have the matte white in the kitchen. That juxtaposition of the two together, but also the pure geometry was carried through into the kitchen collection. He put it in his new apartment in New York, which is stunning. It was featured in Architectural Digest. It really even shows the how the Brizo brand has evolved, but how Jason has evolved as a designer. It's still something super unique, but pure and simple, and just let the piece speak for itself. And like I said, for me to be a part of that and to be involved in that collaboration for so many years has been really, really exciting to be a part of, for sure.
That's awesome. And I know you guys have done other things that were a line that was influenced by the Bauhaus, I believe, the Litza line. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Litza is the Bauhaus movement. One of our designers, that's a beautiful line. It's probably our most successful line due to the appreciation for a variety of components within the suite. So it's a little bit different take on pure geometry, but it still feels very much rooted in that Bauhaus movement. You'll see we have 6 different handle variations for it. We introduced a split finish. And then what really was the highlight of that line is we introduced knurling, which is a textured pattern. You see it a lot on tools, but the idea was to introduce a tactile component to this beyond, we've seen soft touch before. We've seen different material accents, but this was a stunning, really tight knurling that shines on the finish. And not only does it feel amazing, but it looks amazing. So it literally glistens, when light hits it, but it's rooted in this in this really pure form that grounds it just perfectly. And then it has all of our technology built into it. And it's a really beautiful line. And that is a full lineup of kitchen, bath, accessories, all the different lab configurations. It's got a couple different unique valves and unique architectures. And that continues to be something that is a real success for Brizo.
The Litza, the knurling that you were talking about, it's a really, when you say tight, I mean, the pattern is really small, right?
Yeah.
I'm remembering, I'm familiar with it. In fact, I think we're
using it on a project.
That's great.
Yeah.
And for the record, we don't get money for that. We do it because we like it.
Yeah,
but I do recall now, we were comparing the kitchen faucet, I believe it was from the Litza line that you guys produced versus another one. And they're both, both companies are high-end products, both very nice. But the details in the Litza faucet were just better. There was just a little more thought to all the small nuances, like I don't know if you call it the escutcheon, but the plate where the faucet meets the was a little bit tighter from what I remember. And there were just these small things, and we're like, this is the better one. And so I don't know how. So I guess my question sort of from that is, like, how do you guys produce simple geometries but have these details that are so well thought out? Because I do feel like it's quite easy to miss the mark when you're dealing with that level of subtlety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's what we feel differentiates us, and that's what we strive for with our entire design team that we do. That level of refinement, the amount of revisions we go through for every Brizo concept. I mean, it can sometimes be hundreds of concepts that we go through just to get that detailing right. There's numerous examples of details that we could just mold into a casting, very simply, but we felt for the integrity of the design needs to be a separate piece. Mm-hmm. There's just a little things like that. One of our handles, so I designed a line called Rook. Rook is really, the inspiration was from this. My wife's also a designer, and we go to architectural salvage places a lot. We found this really big industrial cart that you've probably seen everywhere. This one was really unique because it was a bank cart. So it had bank stampings and coins on the side of it. It was really unique, but it had all these industrial rivets and this metal bent top that was all attached with these the rivets, and then these leather straps, and all these unique things. But we put it in our home, and it became this beautiful collision of a little bit more masculine, something a lot more warm, and then our house is like a lot of mid-century modern. But what it made us think of is the collision of traditional and modern. So how do you combine those two? So when I approached Rook, I took that task of doing that, but the level of detail we had to go into to make it look realistic. So the handle is actually 17 individual components, all put together with a lot of precision there, to make it look like it's a stack of parts that are all twisted and turned together and held together, much like the piece we found. Things aren't built like that nowadays, because it takes an enormous amount of effort to do so. But ultimately that attention to detail, that acknowledgement that these pieces all need to be finished separately and then attached together, made the piece really, really special. But that's just an example of how we approach everything. Those little details matter, that effort, the amount of focus on even the littlest detail, whether it's an escutcheon or whether it's the spout. It's really how the Brizo brand separates itself from the rest that's out there. And you're absolutely right. It's easy to do, especially simple geometry. So going back to Litza now, simple geometry is easy to do wrong.
Yeah.
We feel like there's so many things like, oh, you do half and half, and then you're like, that doesn't look right. And it's that refinement process to get those proportions. So if you look at Brizo, every piece has kind of a unique proportion to it, which is one of the many ways that we approach design for the brand.
Proportion, that's interesting.
So when you guys design those fixtures, those fittings, do you like have a picture of what kitchen it would go in? Like, do you try to design it in context without really designing the context? Or can you just look at the object without trying to paint the context?
That's a really great question. I think the real truthful answer is sometimes, but sometimes not.
Yeah.
Like if you would ask me, so Rook, for example, I think I could describe the room that I would put it in, but that doesn't mean that I'm designing it only for that room.
Right.
But what I'm trying to do from a holistic approach is what ultimately am I trying to do with this? So Rook was the collision of traditional and modern. Now, how do I do that? So we did a couple different ways. We introduced a spout architecture that was new at that time. We introduced a split finish. So we did a matte black with a polished nickel,
Wow.
which was a new word to that time, something we hadn't done before, but then also gave you the option of like an all polished nickel model. So you could choose to introduce that depending on your space. So if you wanted something that was a lot, or maybe more chic or more refined, maybe it was a little bit brighter, maybe you don't put the matte black in there. Maybe you stick with the all polished nickel model and it'll look beautiful. But maybe you wanted to introduce, some darker cabinets and some darker materials and a little bit more, maybe a dark wall pattern or something, then maybe that matte black would work in there. But when we take a look at our designs, we're trying to be distinctive, but also the acknowledgement that there isn't one perfect environment these can go into. Right. That we're trying to reach an audience that might want to change their space more often than the masses, right? Brizo is going to be a really special space, so you want to be able to meet those needs.
I like the last line you just said because as you were talking, I was thinking about this question of specific products that are manufactured and pre-made and fitting the space that's being designed around it or vice versa. And I do feel like, you have to think about this, but I do feel like when, in the case of like a faucet, if it's designed really, really well, it almost has the ability to kind of operate or work really great in a larger number of different spaces. I mean, there's a limit to that, perhaps you could argue, but more so than faucets, which are simply trendy and kind of a one-liner kind of thing. They only work in one kind of space and that's it. But when there's a subtlety that you were describing earlier, I think maybe that's what allows your fixtures and faucets to kind of work in a little more variety of spaces in a way.
Yeah, for us, it's finding that classic, timeless design, something that's new, that's refreshing, that is maybe a nod to a trend, but not necessarily following trends.
Yeah,
we certainly don't follow fads, but trends from a Brizo perspective, we're trying to set trends, from a Brizo perspective. But yeah, I think what you said is very well said.
I'm looking at the Rook right now, and so the Rook is spelled R-O-O-K for people who want to look it up as they're watching or listening, and the Litze is L-I-T-Z-E. Yes. I'm looking at the Rook tub filler with the two handles. It's a pretty slick thing. Particularly like the spout, which is like this it's almost like a flower trombone kind of bell shape. So when you guys embark on creating a new product line, are you basically starting from scratch? Like what things carry over from the previous experiences that you've had, and what things, or how much are you starting from a blank page to kind of be more free?
Well, for Brizo, it's pretty much a blank slate every time. Yeah. I think if we don't do that, then we might just be designing the same things with subtle changes, and that's not what we want for Brizo. That being said, is we want to learn from the things we've done each time. So if you look at Rook compared to Kinsu, which is one of our newer product lines, you can see from a technology standpoint, from a design standpoint, from a materials and finish standpoint, we've advanced. So we want to make sure the things that we've learned, whether it's a new material, a new process, maybe a new technology in the showering, that we can implement, we want to incorporate those into the line. But we usually don't start with, hey, I found this new material, design something around it. Or we have this new technology. Could you design a new Brizo line for me around it? That's typically not how it happens. We spend, as a design team, we spend 10 to 15% of our time just, it doesn't have to be faucet related. It doesn't even have to be in the office or at your home. It might just be traveling. But the intention is to find unsolicited concepts. So things that none of us thought of, things that none of us are working on. Rook was one of those. Kinsu was one of those. Arteso was one of those. Some of the inception, like Vessi, one of the heritage, the very, very first Brizo suites, were all based off of just experiences our designers had. They were inspired to design a cool product. And then that led to the kicking off of a big project and to the expansion of the entire suite of products. But it's usually starting with a blank piece of paper and some inspiration, but to make sure that doesn't grow stagnant, we're required to travel out of the country twice a year.
Oh, really?
So a tough part of our job is we get to travel the world.
Oh, no, poor you.
Yeah. We fully embrace that. So whether it's going to Copenhagen or whether it's going to London Design Week or Milan or Singapore, we've even been to Australia to do some Design Week stuff. The goal is to discover, to explore the world. We never go alone. We always go with another designer or two or three, just to bounce ideas off each other, to engage the senses, to open up, just your mind a little bit. And most of those trips come back with fruitful designs, whether it's the spark of an idea or whether it's an entire suite. That we had a designer design a suite on the flight home once from Italy. So so we encourage that because we know that's how the creative process works. There's no one way to approach the creative process, but we also know that the challenge for Brizo suite every time is, can we get better? What can we do new? What can we do that no one's done before? So it's a monumental task, but when you love what you do, and it's easy to accept that challenge as a designer and just go after it.
I think it's so great that you guys travel to do that. And I also feel like there are certain questions or certain statements that a lot of design studios make. Like, oh, we have an open office. There's no hierarchy is one answer we get all the time. Or we travel. But it's like, but do you really travel? And I think it's very easy in design professions to also be stuck at your desk because we all tend to be very dedicated and you're just in the computer space or the drafting space or whatever it might be over and over and over again. And there's definitely some value to that rigor. But I think it's great that you guys actually do actually travel out, into the world and different countries with different people. Let me ask, so when you're going to these different places, are there, this is getting very specific, but is it destination based? Are you going for like design conference things? Are you exploring cities? Like what does the typical travel entail?
So typically that's the reason to go. So we'll go to Copenhagen Design Week is one that the team went to several years ago. That was the reason we were going, is for Design Week, but we never only do that. So typically we go at minimum a week, sometimes 2 weeks. You go to the show, you go to the main purpose you were there, go to the events, do the symposiums or whatever, but then it's go get lost in the city. You do some of the touristy stuff, and then you do some of the non-touristy stuff where you go to the art galleries, go to, if there's maybe there's a musical performance or a live artist, something, go get lost in the city. That's where the real discovery happens. A lot of the times those shows, people are showing stuff that either you might know of or the public might know of, or might not be super new, or we might know some of the technology or something like that. But you really discover when you start going into the shops in these cities, or you start seeing the art, or you just go pay attention to architecture, what's new in architecture. What's happening a lot is the blending of the old architecture versus the new modern architecture and how it's blending together. And you might not get that domestically. So when you travel, you start to pay more attention to that. My joke is always, when we travel, I pay a lot of attention to doors and door hardware.
Yeah.
Like, I'm aware of it here, but man, do I really come back with a ton of pictures of doors when I'm traveling, and I don't know why, but I think it's just one of those, like, it just unlocks your senses and just you start paying attention to everything. We went to Vancouver a few years ago, and I remember we had a tour guide with us, and she was just laughing because we all stopped at this one boardwalk and we're all on the ground taking photos of the boardwalk. Like, you guys are weird. And I was like, yep, that's designers,
And it's an interesting process that you would go out into the world in these different places and somehow that become influenced by that information. And sometimes, at least speaking for myself, it can feel more direct. Like, you can distinctly remember, oh, I saw this thing, it led me to this train of thinking. And other times it's just a weird mixing of whatever experience has happened and out comes something at the end. But I like the idea of traveling as almost as a way to be open to other things, but as a way to disrupt, also to break loose maybe from what you've done before.
I think that's really well said. I think disrupting your daily process, daily tasks, I think that's key.
So how did you manage last year when travel was not possible?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we've been getting that question a lot too. I think that's, so we do work with a couple trend tracking agencies that were able to provide us with a lot of information from shows, a lot of information from some of their travels and their satellite locations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's one way. But the beauty of the digital era we're in now and how much technology is advancing is a lot of places opened up for you to digitally explore. Mm-hmm. That's not the same. Let's be real. I make no qualms about that. It's not the same as being there, but you could walk through all the Smithsonian museums last year. You could hike some of the great trails throughout the world, some of the mountains. You could visit museums. You could visit the Louvre, just digitally last year. So we took a lot of advantage of that. The other thing is a lot of those design conferences that we try to attend in person were still digital. So you were still able to have those conversations with great thought thinker or great thought leaders in the world and still pick their brain about design and about what's happening in the world. So although it was very challenging, we did our best to fully embrace all of the digital side of things that were available to us.
But did COVID kind of maybe made you guys think differently about the products that you design? Like, do you think there is going to be a change in that industry as well as architecture? People start rethinking office space and how living space and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think wellness at the home is the biggest trend we're paying attention to right now. The COVID definitely changed a lot of people's perceptions on cleanliness, on well-being, on how to take care of not only yourself but your home. Mm-hmm. How clean is your home? Mm-hmm. And then you talk about it changed fashion. It changed how we work. I mean, we'd be silly not to acknowledge the fact that it's going to change and probably continue to change some aspects of our life, and then specifically for our products, how they're used. The expectation of cleanliness is at an all-time high, right?
Yeah.
So, if we have technology that you can just tap on a faucet on and off, it better work. It better be reliable. So that we spend a lot of time, making sure that what we're doing from a health and wellness perspective is encouraging you to wash your hands at the easiest possible way. Our technology is helping advance, our ability to introduce technology that helps you, whether it's clean your body or clean your hands or sanitize and all that. So we're looking at all of that. We're also looking at, is bathroom and shower space being taken up to build offices and homes. So we're taking a look at that, and people are renovating a ton now. So I know we took advantage. We did a massive kitchen renovation during COVID, and it was something for us that were home so much that when it was complete, it was just like, oh, this is so much better. You know, we added things that made tasks better and better movement and more light in the home.
Yeah.
And it allowed us to introduce more nature into the home, which is another thing that we're seeing a ton. I'm sure you're seeing that as well. But that desire to bring things that tie us back into nature into the home are gonna shape design for the next few years for sure.
It's almost like a lot of homeowners or people in the domestic space, because they've been at home for so long, or had been at home for so long, they were like hyper aware of the surroundings. And I'm sort of speculating. I wonder if it's probably what like a lot of architects or interior designers and designers in general see already, but now maybe more people are more in tune with it because they've been forced to be in there. Talking about technology. So I know that Brizo has done some interesting things in terms of faucet technology. So what are some of the things that have happened in the past and some of the things that might be happening in the works or in the future?
So first and foremost, the scarcity of water is something that is near and dear to our hearts, and something, you know, it goes along with that luxury with the conscious for Brizo. You know, it's one of our pillars. So how can we make a more indulgent shower while using less water? You know, that's something when we talk about technology, you think about electronics, or you think about touch faucets, and you think about that stuff that's foundational to our brand. But really at our core, it's you know, how can we use less water but give you an amazing experience in the shower? So there's a lot of technology we're working on on making amazing showers, you know, incredibly indulgent, you know, holding the temperature of the water as long as possible, but changing that experience. You know, we're obviously, you know, as a company, we're looking into connected things and how we might approach that, you know, how we might bring in better user experience with all of our products. But then also, you know, our technology of ease of use of our kitchen faucets, our hands-free faucets, the lavatory faucets, you know, items like that become even more important, that the technology is sound and long lasting and then still beautiful, right? There's a lot of products out there that have amazing technology. They're just not beautiful. It's something you wouldn't put in your home. Mm-hmm. So, you know, especially in my role. So my role specifically deals, you know, with how we're approaching technology, you know, thinking forward. So we're taking a look at a lot. And we hope to be introducing some stuff in the next few years about advancing our technology to you know, make your experience better at home.
So I've always wondered, like, can you describe a little bit how the engineering or the architecture behind shaping water so that it provides an experience even though there's less water?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Like, is there some kind of magic dust in
it's called magic.
the faucet? Like, what is it? You guys.
That's a really, really good question. So one of the technologies we use in our showering is literally shaping the droplets of the water. No moving parts, but we're able to create these little chips. We call them chips. It's a little water outlet that creates turbulence in the water and shapes the water droplets to be bigger, which, because of hydrodynamics, can hold the temperature of the water longer. So it literally was the study of the water in the rainforest.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's one of those, like, I remember when the engineers were playing with this technology, I was like, guys, come on, really? Like, that sounds very marketing, you know. And then it is the only showering system that I'll use in our showers now. So it's pretty awesome. And so what we can do with that is you can use less water because the droplets are bigger. It retains the water temperature longer, and that's all done through studies. And it creates a really unique pattern too. I mean, it feels like a rainstorm. I mean, they're big droplets, splatter all over you and all that. So then incorporating that technology and then adding things like, well, what if we can do that? And then you can divert the water into a waterfall, you know? So our Kinsu line has an amazing shower head that does that. So it's literally a big waterfall that just falls on you. It's pretty spectacular. But it still uses less water. So it's that collision of art and science. It's acknowledging the fact that our engineers have something amazing to offer us from a design perspective, and then the fact that we work with them so closely so we can make it look beautiful and function beautifully.
I want to continue the conversation with technology, but before that, the last thing you were saying makes me wonder, like, how big is the design team? And because you're talking about working closely, and I get the sense that with the merging of the art and science, as you just said, but also the designs themselves, like the aesthetics of it, I feel like it's I don't know if it's a small team, but I feel like it's a very personal team. You know, it's not a big mass production manufacturing kind of too many chefs in the kitchen kind of situation.
So our design team is 10 designers. That's it.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. So we are a small team, but we all have that same desire to. I say it's become masters of our craft, which I believe is an endless journey. And everybody has that same kind of mentality coming into what we do. But for the Brizo brand, is we see that design team. It's not defined. We're not just a design team. Our engineers are absolutely world class, and they want challenges. That's what I love about our engineering team is they're not looking to do the regular stuff. If we have one component that's like, oh, this is it's a drawer pull, I get it. They're like, that's boring. What else you got for me? So they are seeking those challenges, and there's an acknowledgement, between our brand, our marketing, our sales, our engineers, our design team, our production team, that we're all going to work together. And there's an understanding of the overall goals and pillars of Brizo, and we're not going to sway on those, and those are going to be our guiding light. And it's what we're all striving for. So it's why you get such amazing, what I feel, amazing products and amazing ideas from that brand.
It's fascinating because Brizo is a big brand and you have a huge production. I mean, in terms of the presence in the market and how many things are sold and whatnot. But the operation to produce these things, to design and engineer these things sounds very boutique when you describe it.
Yep. I think that's a great description of it.
So going back to technology then, you were mentioning that clearly there's like the motion sensor technology. There's the ones that use your elbow to kind of, activate and things like this. But you also talked about that perhaps it's a little bit dangerous or tempting to prematurely integrate these things without enough thought. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we say just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I know that's silly, but the truth is we find technologies every day that just don't make sense. They don't really solve an unmet need. Our technology, the smart touch technology was discovered doing ethnographic research. So we do a lot of research. Ethnographic research, for anybody who's not familiar, is research is it's watching people live. We literally put cameras up in people's homes, obviously with their permission, and we're not watching for a couple of days. We're watching for a couple of weeks.
Wow!
And that technology was discovered based off of day one. Everybody is all properly dressed and they're making food and everybody's happy and smiling. And day 12, real life hits, right? The dog's jumping up on the counter, kids are spilling food, nobody's dressed and ready for school. And that's the day when you say like, hey, make dinner tonight. And you watch people prepare dinner and you see stuff like, the water's on way too much, way more than they tell you it's on, in the kitchen. And then we watched someone make chicken, and they prepared chicken, put in the oven, and then they were just like frozen. They had just, they just prepared chicken, and that was like they were biohazard, and they were trying to figure out how to turn their faucet on because they had chicken hands.
Yeah.
And that's when it was like, whew. So that kicked off that smart touch technology, which is just the touch technology. It's actually the same technology that was used that is used early in the iPhone. It's that same type of technology, capacitance technology. It's far superior to anything infrared, but it was the basis technology that made us start to like, this is what meeting unmet needs is, versus asking people, do you want more water in your shower? Do you want more power in the spray? do you want a more beautiful faucet? Yes, 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 yes. So how can we really resonate with the end user of our product? So as we do that, we're constantly evaluating new technologies. The first question is, does this meet an unmet need? And we research a lot. That's an integral process to our entire design process, is getting feedback on what we're doing.
I think part of that story that's interesting also is the difference between just listening to what people are telling you versus what's actually happening. And there's a perception difference pretty often. We find the same things when we're working with clients. We often say it's not great. It's not good for an architect or interior designer or whoever to just listen to what the client wants and then produce that. It never works out. Because there's always a perception difference between what they think they need and what they do. And then also, you have to do your research. You have to be the expert. You have to be the responsible person.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you have to know the right questions to ask to get them talking, right? You can't just say, it's way more than what do you want, what do you like, what you don't like. That's just the beginning of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys do a lot of different finishes for your products, right? You have like concrete, wood, I think even pearl, it's how much more complex does that make the process of designing those faucets to try and implement materials that no one else is using?
Yeah, it does add complexity, but back to who we are as a brand, that's something we embrace. In my role, so I think you asked this a while ago and I didn't directly answer it. So my role is manager of the Design Futures team. So the Design Futures team is a subset group of our industrial design team. So my team focuses on all things color, material, finish, trends, advanced design, advanced manufacturing. So on my team, we have a CMF designer, and she's also an industrial designer, and she focuses on predicting and creating trends.
Sorry, what is CMF?
Oh, go ahead. Oh, color, material, finish. Okay. Sorry, I should have clarified that. Okay. So color, material, finish, and then she's also a designer. And then we have a chemist on our team that he is the primary source of creating the chemical compounds for our finishing. And so our job is to find those, what are we going to do next from a finish perspective? What are we going to do next from a material perspective? A designer might say example, like, hey, I saw this mother of pearl. I kind of want to put it in my new product line. Can you help me discover, can we source it? Is it sustainable? Can we manufacture it? Can it be cut and put into shapes? Can we find somewhere that'll create it to where or cut it to where it's the right material for us? Does it withstand to our quality standards? With Brizo, it's a collision of the futures team discovering some materials and finishes, and the design team suggesting stuff back and forth. But it's very curated. That's how we approach it from Brizo. You won't see 37 different finishes. You won't see 100 different materials, but it's all very specific. Those choices are very, very thought through. So Kinsu is one of the line that we introduced, mother of pearl. You'll notice it's not on 5 lines, it's on 1 line. It's because it's perfect for that specific handle and that specific lineup. And we only do that when it's right for the design, right for the brand, and it just mates up perfectly with the design.
That makes sense. That sounds pretty cool.
It's interesting with the teamwork, because I feel like you guys are operating as a whole. You're operating like artists and engineers being combined, but there's also a fair amount of structure within the team. So like the team structure is designed, but not overly engineered in a way where it becomes commercialized, if that makes sense.
That's all very purposely built and set up.
So the other thing you mentioned was with your team is the technology aspect, right? And you had also mentioned connection or connectivity, which leads to the idea of the smart home, which is, I feel like has been this term that's been used for the last, decade or so. And maybe has always been sold at a greater level than it's been executed in reality for the most part. But so how does, Brizo meet the smart home, and how does that come into play?
So it's obviously something we're paying very much attention to. So we're in the process of figuring out what's right for Brizo to be a part of that, or if it's right. I think I've seen many companies and many products fail in that IoT space that just didn't solve any problems. It was just, let's make it connected, because everybody has a phone, so right. My pushback to anything that we're evaluating or that any company looks into is, what's that doing for the homeowner? What's that doing for, for the designer, for the specifier? Like, if it really doesn't bring something of benefit to the homeowner, then all it is just a cool thing, and for Brizo, we want to be more than that. So I could tell you without giving away too much. I can tell you that we're obviously looking into that and how we play in that market. But we have nothing right now. But we want to, before we enter any kind of market or any kind of technology, whether it be like the showering technology or our smart touch technology, we want to make sure it's right for the brand, right for us, and then make sense to homeowners.
I think that makes sense. I mean, especially you guys are in the luxury space, and kind of significant missteps should be avoided. And you're right. A lot of the appliances and fixtures, fittings, and all this stuff in homes become very gadgety, and it gets confusing, frankly. Yep. From a home owner user perspective, you have 15 different apps to control everything. Your neon lights and your fans. It's like, I don't think we need red lights in my fans,
Yeah. I'd love to say that I'm not a part of that, but I am. I test so many, I'm one of those. I try not to be, but I'm a first adopter of a lot of technology. And sometimes I'm just like, why did I do that?
I was wondering, how often do you guys produce a new line? Is it consistent? Is it like every 2 years or?
So we try to launch something new every year. That's the goal.
Wow.
It doesn't always work because we will halt something or we will start over if it's just not working. That has happened. And that's one of the things I admire about the brand is if it's whether the manufacturing isn't up to par, or we can't solve an issue quite right, or the design just isn't resonating yet, we'll take the amount of time that's required. So it's one thing. So although there's that enormous pressure to produce every year from the design team, if it's just not right, we'll take the time to get it right. But we try to keep a decent cadence of something in the kitchen and bath every year. That's the goal. That being said, our design process, it can take 2 to 3 years sometimes to develop those products.
Right.
So when you think about that, if you think about, our paying attention to trends and materials and finish and really making sure it's right, we're doing a lot of predicting.
Right.
So we have to do our due diligence. We have to be right because of the amount of effort that's put in. So, whether it's, the discovery of a new material, a new architecture, a new process, I've always really appreciated the fact that the entire team takes the time to evaluate that before we're ready for launch.
Do you find yourself like implementing or like refreshing some of the ideas just to stay, current in a way? Like if you started designing a faucet, like 3 years ago and you had your 2 and, a newer material or something came out, like, do you find yourself having to kind of revise the design to?
Yeah, that does happen. Typically what we do is we start with the signature piece in the lineup. So for Brizo, it's usually the widespread lavatory that we start with. So then it can go in many directions. Typically what happens is as we discover more, you start to get a feel for what the entire suite is going to look like. And is there a new finish or a new material? Then that triggers something. We could use a new architecture in the lab, or boy, if I could use a new valving system, I could design something we've never seen before. And that's how that process works. And that's when the engineers get excited when you bring a new challenge to them. They expect us to show them a widespread lavatory, but they don't expect us to show something with a valve that's never, Kinsu's a really good example. It used a whole new valve architecture that we've never used before for the single handle lav. And, they embraced it and they loved the new challenge. But yeah, I'm working on a suite that'll launch a year from now in Brizo. And just recently we pivoted a little bit, and we're going to add a couple new things to the lineup based on just, I kind of thought of a couple new ideas and just bouncing it off the team. We wanted to implement them. So we're going to add to that line. So yeah, it very much happens. And I think that's that being adaptable, that evolving as the brand evolves and matures. And that happens with our designs as well.
Are you guys ever thinking of having some of your faucets for like outdoor use?
Yeah, we get that question a lot too. And I think it's a little bit different of an animal for us, but it's something that we're definitely researching and looking into to see if it's right for the brand.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking, like a nice kitchen that extends outside. I want to have the same faucets.
Asking for ourselves more than for anything else.
Yeah.
Could you just do the rest of the fittings and fixtures of the entire home, please?
But that would be amazing. Or even an outdoor shower. There is not many cool options out there.
That is a good question, and maybe you sort of answered it, but again,
do you take personal requests?
Speaking as people have to spec things.
There's a lot of things to take into account. Yeah. A lot of things to take into account when you're looking at different spaces, especially outdoors. We hold our finishes in high regard for their quality and their durability. So does that change when you put everything outside?
Yeah.
So there's some new considerations to take into, depending on the location of if you're near seawater, does that, or ocean water, does that change, I meant to say salt water, duh. If you're near salt water, that could potentially change some of the finish, durability.
Yeah. Sort of similar from that, I was wondering, why don't you guys do full lines that extend, for bathroom, kitchen, and even bed, everything throughout the house? Is there any desire to do within a line a bigger set, so to speak? Or
are you talking about beyond faucets?
Beyond faucets. I mean, I know you guys do what's the term, fittings, like towel bars and things like that in the bathrooms, but I'm even thinking
toilet, bathtubs.
Well, maybe not quite that
hardware.
far, but all the hardware in our home. Is there any thought of broadening the scope to that wide, or has things become diluted at that point?
So not currently, but we do get that question a lot. And I think it's a nod to my interpretation is that Brizo is doing something right. So there's a desire to see some of that stuff throughout the home. The realism of it is we are still a relatively small company, so that's a monumental task to add on to that. And we're still wrapping our heads around, how can we perfect what we do? So we got a long ways to go, but I think it's not out of the realm of possibility, certainly. And it's from a design perspective, it's certainly something that we will occasionally just design something, beyond the faucet realm, that just goes with the product line, just for fun. It won't go into production, but there definitely is a desire for that from our end. But the realism of it, the complexity that adds to what we currently do. We don't want to dilute the level of that what we do, and the highest quality that we produce. We don't want to dilute any of that so that we can get more products into the home.
Yeah, totally. The other thing we were talking about a moment ago was trends and, designing things or working on things 2 or 3 years out. I forget my question now. It had to do with the challenges with that. Trends. Nuts. I wrote it down. I wrote down trends, and I don't remember why I wrote down trends.
What have you noticed, new trends? Like you mentioned the black matte finish a few years ago.
Yep. So for us, the newest trends and I think, this is no secret, everybody's seeing it, that the evolution of black, it's definitely evolving. Matte black, used to be here and there. And now it's you better have matte black in your lineup, in kitchen and bath. You better have it or you're going to lose sales, but it's super relevant. But we're seeing from a trend perspective, the evolution of that. So whether it's, changing of tones in it, or adding texture, adding mix and match materials with it, tone on tone within in black. That's something we're not only seeing in hardware, but we're seeing it in home design and exterior design, and you're seeing it in car design. We're seeing it in fashion. So I think that's something that's here to stay. It's something that we're paying very much attention to. And, from my team in particular, we're trying to figure out how we can attack that.
Is the gold brass finish still popular, or was that?
Oh yeah. Gold's here to stay for a while. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's a million different interpretations on that. We have Lux Gold and Brizo that we get really good feedback on. It's doing really well for us, and we get a lot of very positive feedback. And then we introduced Polished Gold, which is so you have basically a textured version or a brush version and a non-brush, and they're both very well accepted. It took us forever to get those right. So that's the thing. It's a painstaking process, but I appreciate the fact that our team puts forth the effort to get the finishes right, not only from a quality standpoint, not only from a durability standpoint, but from a how they look and how they're going to work on our different architectures. That's something I've always appreciated. But yeah, we're not seeing gold go away anytime soon.
I sort of remember my question with trends. It's kind of. It had to do, because you had mentioned that you work with trend, I forget what the title, trend expert, trend. Yep. Yeah, right. And what is that relationship like? Because it does seem like that doing something 2 or 3 years out, even though you are evolving and bringing in new ideas as that time goes, does seem like some kind of calculated risk, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the truth is, it is a calculated risk, but they are one. It's a big one, but they are one of the data points that we get. We're looking at data constantly, whether it's from our trend agencies, or whether it's from home builders associations, or whether it's from just we're looking at fashion and cars and housewares and different shows. And so we're taking data in from a lot of places. So we've been doing this since Brizo's inception. So we feel fairly comfortable with our approach. But yeah, the truth is it's calculated risk, right? We are designing a product that's going to stay in your home 5 to 7 years, maybe longer, so we can't miss on it. We can't be wrong. So we don't take it lightly. So the advantage of, the agencies that we work with is that, we also do a ton of our own work, but the agencies we work with can travel a lot more than we can. Their job is to travel the world. They go everywhere. They also go to all the shows that we go to, but they go to places that we've never been, that we can't go, or they're traveling, 300 plus days a year. So they're constantly giving, especially Maris, they're feeding Maris is our color, material, and finish designer. They're feeding her with ideas and just basic general trend information, and we're trying to compile it. We spent some significant time as a design team just going through the data that we're getting from, ultimately it's looking at how people live in their homes, and how it's constantly changing. That COVID, what it caused trends to do from our perspective is we had predefined 4 or 5 trends that, you could kind of put a persona to and kind of imagine what their home would look like. And now it's like we took those and just kind of shook them all. And now the blending of styles is happening like it's never before, or like it's never has before. So it's really unique to see that. One of the things I like, I love mid-century modern design, but mid-century modern design is in every trend. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And you see it at even the retail outlets. You see it, so you're starting to see some type of interpretation of mid-century modern design show up everywhere. And that hasn't been like that since, the last few years.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we've noticed that for sure as well, especially in the architecture space. And I don't know, this is a big question. I don't know who has the answers to this, but I wonder why that's the case. Why sort of the semi-return to this thing, or the evolution of this thing? I don't know if it has to do with comfort.
I was going to say comfort is big. I think the other thing is nostalgia. I think, as the generation the younger generations are now purchasing homes and building homes, and they want stuff that tells a story in their home. Like the few pieces I have just in this room, there's a story behind each of these, you know, and that's what I love about it. Like my entire home is filled with vintage mid-century pieces, and it's because that's what my wife and I love. But there's either a story about how we found it somewhere in an architectural salvage place, or my grandma wanted to get rid of this dresser, and I'm like, oh, it's beautiful. And so we'll refinish it and put it in our home. And the other thing is as people travel throughout the world, they bring pieces of that travel, those stories. They want something in their home that represents that. To me, that's why those trends are starting to kind of blend and collide. And I think just that comfort and nostalgia of mid-century modern seems to be kind of the connecting point.
You know, what's also interesting is what you just said about, you know, the specific furniture pieces you have in your house. But the way you described it and the story being kind of channeled into these pieces seems very parallel, if not the same, as the description of the faucets you guys design. And even going back to like the first story you told about Judd describing this faucet at the beginning of Brizo, and you had this whole story behind it. And I think like one of the things that maybe clients or non-designers don't quite realize is the importance of those narratives, not just because they're fun to tell and they add this extra layer of being able to have a talking piece, a piece to talk about, but it like actually affects the design, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about this job. You know, these stories that we tell are not marketing spiel. They're not, okay, what cool story can we tell that'll sell this faucet? It's really the inspiration story behind the products. So it allows us to be very comfortable and very transparent about our process and about how we find inspiration and about what this faucet means to me. And the fun thing about my career is I've been fortunate to listen to the stories of what those faucets and what those products mean to other people. So there's a lot of interior designers that will tell the stories of their process of speccing one of our products and how the joy it brought or the emotion that it evoked in the spaces they're designing. So to me, like that's success, you know, being able to tell those stories and then connecting with people. It's definitely my favorite part of the job.
Are there certain like design principles that you guys try to meet or follow with every line? Like, I don't know. I once had a teacher in design school who, and these were just formal principles in this case, but he was like, oh, we have these principles. He called it CHOBU, CHOBU. He's like, everything must have contrast, order, balance, hierarchy, and unity. And I think he got a lot of kind of flack in school for being so cheesy, but it worked. I remember it like 20 years later.
Sure.
But I was wondering, you know, so the stories are what kind of drive the spirit behind the faucets. But are there other things that you guys look for when you're critiquing their work that you're producing?
I mean, I think that just foundational principles of good design that we've all been taught in school, those are table stakes. You know, with Brizo, there's always the next level of refinement. What can you do? You know, and we take it as a task. So if I'm showing what I say is my final design, the rest of the team will take it as a task to challenge me on like, you know, is there one more revision left? Is there one thing that you've forgotten? Is there something that's just not quite right? And 100% of the time, it's always inspired me to go back and really produce something that I'm truly proud of. And, you know, we encourage that. But, you know, like our guiding light for our design team is to create those inspiring experiences. That's what we're trying to do. And it means something different in all that we do. But then you collide that with distinctive design, artful craftsmanship, inspired innovation, and luxury with the conscious, which are the pillars of Brizo. And those are what we use as our guiding lights. And then the design kind of just evolves out of that.
Right, right.
Do you do like mostly sketches, mostly 3D models, physical models? Do you even get to test the faucets yourself with water?
Yep. No, that's a great question. I love talking about this. I could talk for hours about our process and design. I really do enjoy it. But we don't have a standard process on how we all work. But typically it starts It used to start with pen and paper, and now we all have digital sketching devices that, so we'll do a lot of sketching, especially with Brizo. Myself, it's a lot of bad sketching, but to me, as long as you can express the idea and get the idea across, the quality of the sketch isn't so much important. But then we get right into 3D modeling on our CAD software. That's my expertise. That's where I like to do the most creative thinking. That's where I do all my iterations. To me, that's where the ideas become real. I'm a huge fan of Legos. So to me, being able to touch and feel and see something in 3D is really where I need to be. So I jump into the 3D software pretty quickly. But then we have an entire model shop at our headquarters that gives us access to 3D printers, to CNCs, to anything you could imagine. And that model shop's goal is to build prototypes for us all the time. So I might build 100 different prototypes for one spout, but they're going to build them for me. And then we have flow benches in the base in this workshop as well too. So a really good example. I didn't design it, but the Vetus Lab has a really, really unique water flow. It has a square, and the water kind of falls through, but the water comes from all four sides.
Oh.
Our designer did well over 100 variations of that, just the tip of that spout to get the water flow right. So although that can be, let's be real, it can be frustrating at times, but it's also the best part of the job when you can actually work with the water. You can shape the water through design, through different interior tweaks and stuff you can do to the design. But it's very much a part of our process is to prototype and then test all the water flow and the things we're trying to create.
So to test the water flow, you actually have to build the whole faucet inside and out, right, to properly test it?
Yeah, so we have ways to, we can create the waterways quickly in our software, and then you can make it to where it can attach to water fairly quickly and fairly easily. But 3D printing technology has made things so much easier and so much better. When I first started, it was, you would design something, you'd have to send it somewhere to be produced, and it would take weeks to get back. Yeah. And then you would just pray that it's right. And if it wasn't right, then you have to send back, you make the 30-minute tweak and then send it back out. And now I can design a spout, I can send it to our model shop. The next morning, it'll be sitting on my desk.
Wow.
I mean, it's incredible. At maximum, it's 2 days, but they work so quickly. And they've become an integral part of our design process so that we can study because let's be real, our process is really iterative. We do a lot of variation, and our products are all things you interact with. So you can't just design something and not print it and put your hand on it, or we'll design a hand shower and we'll literally walk it around the building and have different people hold on to it. It's just comfortable, just feel weighted correctly, and we'll do all that. And but yeah, that Rook spout you were looking at with that, it was an open channel spout. I probably did 30 or 40 different variations on that to get the water to flow right. It's inevitable. It'll look beautiful and you turn it off and the water peels back on the lip and then drips down. You're like, yeah, that's not gonna work. It's the last thing you want. So it's definitely a fun part. But yeah, the technology the company has invested in to allow us to pursue design, to pursue the iterative process is pretty awesome.
That's really great.
I love the attention to detail. Getting more nerdy here, what kind of software do you guys use?
We use, it's called Creo.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, never heard of it.
It's a 3D surface modeler. It's the same software that our engineers use. We found that it enables us to live within the realm of math and science, but also allows us to be as creative as we want to be. But because of that transition between engineering and industrial design is seamless.
Right.
Can you simulate water flow on digital
yes,
software?
We can. We do have computational fluid dynamic software, and it's something we don't use a ton because the truth is we can kind of figure out how things are going to flow. But a lot of the times that software doesn't show you the small things like what happens when I turn the water off. It'll show you like, oh, okay, I've got a vortex here, or I got a bunch of chatter up here, so it's going to come out and look messy. You know, that's the thing is when we have those, when you actually seeing the water come up and flow over the spout, you see it all the way back and as it flows up. So if it's if there's turbulence back here, what'll happen is it'll look ugly. The truth is, and it'll look bad. We don't want that. But it can't predict things like if the water comes out of the spout and then drips down slowly. It's not very good at predicting that. But we use it occasionally. We use it more for our bigger like showering components. And it was used a ton to figure out the technology for that, the showering that holds the bigger water droplets. You know, that's relatively easy to simulate there.
You know, as you're talking, I can really understand why designing what you design would be so difficult and why the nuances are so important. Because it also, when I think about faucets, it's such an immediate experience and you're right there. You're 2 feet away from it or whatever the distance is, and you see everything. You know, it's not like you're viewing the facade. Well, you get up close with architecture as well, but it's not like you're viewing this tower or this building from a block away or from a few feet away or whatever it might be. You're touching it. It's very, very immediate.
Yeah, and I think that's having that ability to. I want to design a cross handle, but I'm not sure how's this going to feel in your hand. So set it down. It's back up on my desk, and you're like, oh, that's not right. You know, you can make that immediate change. It's been awesome, that investment in that technology, allowing us to explore more.
So when you guys are in the design process, you're doing the sketches, and the other question I had was you mentioned sketching on the computer. So do you mean like tablets with stylus?
Yeah, we have Wacom's.
Okay.
Wacom tablets.
Yep.
Yeah. So like my main monitor is a 24-inch Wacom that we sketch on.
Cool.
It saved me because you can do variation after variation after variation. You know, you get used to using technology for good, right? So you can, if I don't quite like that spout, I don't have to start all the way over. I can just do a new layer and just adjust it a little bit. It allows us to do that. The other thing it does is our younger designers who are still trying to figure out, believe it or not, faucets are a very unique and difficult thing to design. It's not something you sketch in school. It's not a proportion you're used to. So we use it as, you know, using it as underlays on the digital surface. You know, hey, just go find a picture of one of our faucets and trace over it so you can kind of see the proportions of how you might approach this.
Right.
Yeah. So and for me, it's a lot easier since, like, again, sketching isn't my strongest suit.
And so when you're going through it, and then in the end, you do obviously like a final version that's still a test in a way. So how many of those? I assume you do it right with the finishes and everything before you go into mass production. How many of those iterations happen?
So are you talking like? So if I were to produce the main signature piece, like a widespread lab, I'm probably going to have 10 or 12 that get all the way to I think either one of these could, you know, I think I see potential in these 10 or 12.
I see.
That's when our research process comes in, where I can really get feedback on the nuances of each design. And then that'll kick off the exploration of the entire suite. So single handle labs, on wall, tub showers, showering systems, you know, any custom shower pieces. Do I go lab and kitchen and all that? So, but I mean, we will do literally hundreds, maybe thousands of variations by the time it gets to the final, you know, in the box shipping out to end users.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's funny. I tell all the time, you know, as weird as it sounds, we fail a lot. We get paid to fail a lot.
Yeah.
That's the design process.
Yeah.
If we're not failing, it means we're not learning, we're not discovering, we're not exploring. You know, if you go into our studio, you'll see a couple hundred models just sitting around. And then you'll see another couple hundred that are tucked away in the corners of our offices that are all ones that we're like, I really like this, but boy, it's not ready for the world's not ready for it. Or I thought it was a great idea, but it doesn't. It looks like a movie prop and not a real faucet.
Interesting.
So like I tell people all the time, if you come to our office and then come back in 6 months, all those on display, we have display cards that show just the projects we're working on. They'll all be new. All the concepts will be new, and just because that's how quickly we go through the process, because that's what it takes, to get the quality at the level of design that Brizo requires and that we all want to desire. You have to design a lot of products, and you have to be willing to fail a lot too.
Tying into what you're talking about, and also maybe back to the trend topic and the speed or the pace at which you produce new things. I feel like you guys are somewhere between, like, architecture is very, very slow to produce and very, very slow to kind of catch up to or be in line with trends, let's say. And as a result, I sort of feel like there's a little bit of pressure off of architecture because it's like 6 years to produce a big building. On the flip side, you have like product design for technology like smartphones and other things, which are super, super fast paced, right?
Yep.
And I feel like with the faucets and your space, you're kind of between the two. Like you're beholden, you're responsible, or you're expected to meet the trends, but also, realistically, in most cases, people aren't changing out their faucets as often as their iPhones.
Yep, very true. I think I would prefer that our process be a little bit quicker, but at the same time, I'm extremely proud of what we produce and really proud of the team. So to me, if that's what it takes to get it right, then that's what it'll take,
Do you have, go ahead.
It's funny too that you said like, we have some faucets, like maybe basically the world is not ready for it yet. And it's kind of interesting to think that, like, you guys might have the ability to design things like way beyond maybe the things we could be thinking of or living in now. And basically, right. I don't know, architects and designers and the rest of the world is kind of like holding you back on releasing them, right? I mean, I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe you should just release them and see what happens,
It was a big risk.
That's a very interesting comment. I think a really good example of there's a line in Brizo called Sotria, designed by Celine Garland, who's a tenured designer who's been with Brizo just about as long as I have. She designed Sotria almost 3 years before anybody even acknowledged that, wow, that's a cool faucet. And it's because the first thing they saw is, oh, that's really futuristic. It's an up and out spout, it's leaning forward. But it was funny because she just put it out on her project cart and it sat there. And then eventually more and more people started to be like, oh, what's that? And then, when we launched it, people freaked out. It's got a really unique water flow. It's got a couple of really unique pieces that are really beautiful, really well done. I think this suite might be 6 or 7 years old now, but
wow.
At the time, it just, as designers, sometimes that happens. You design something, and you're just like, I'm a little bit ahead of the curve here, and it might be a combination of I'm ahead of the trends, or maybe it was inspired, by something in Europe. Europe is usually 3 to 5 years ahead of the U.S.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, typically from a trend perspective.
Oh, interesting.
It's coming. It's that gap. We used to say 5 to 7 years, and that gap is closing. And then of course, we're here in the Midwest, which is different than the East and West Coast from a trend perspective. But yeah, so that happens a lot. Now I have several that are sitting in my office that are some of my most proud designs that I know aren't going to ever be produced.
Oh, now I'm very, very curious.
Yeah, but those are the ones we like to show when we give tours of our space. Is like, hey, look at the corner of Seth's office.
Yeah,
he's been proud of that for 5 years now.
Can we place personal orders for these? Or?
Yeah, there you go. No.
Do you have a favorite line that's been produced, or favorite faucet?
That's a really good question. So yeah, for Brizo, I think it's the Odin collection. So the first design that I really broke the mold from what we do was the Odin single handle electronic lav. if you look at that's one that I would really encourage everybody to look up. I'm biased because I'm proud of it, but it was a true task of Judd and I were traveling in Milan, and everything was so minimal, just everything. It seems like door handles, everything. I'm just like, man, I'm tired of being constrained by this valve, by this mechanical valve, that's that big. And it's a little bit of a pain from a designer perspective because it sticks me to a certain proportion. Mm-hmm. I want to move beyond that proportion. So I designed something. Actually, I sketched something quick on the flight home. It was just 3 little lines, really, really crude sketch, but it kicked off. It's basically a real pure geometry, simple tube, and then a handle, simple tube that comes out of it. And it's all controlled by an electronic proportioning valve. So we removed the mechanical valve and made an electronic valve.
Oh.
But what it was the first time that I designed something on screen, on paper and then on screen, and then gave it to the engineers, and the engineers, literally nothing changed. Usually there's some kind of tweaking or some kind of change for manufacturing. And my very first prototype, which I still have, looks exactly like the prototype or like the actual production model. It's got a really unique handle function, which was purposely designed. It's our functional art. Mm-hmm. That's what Judd uses that phrase a lot, and I love it. What we do is functional sculpture. So when you turn the water on, it breaks that perfect form, and there's some tension in the form, but then you get the beautiful water. And then when you turn it off, it becomes this pure geometry, and it's very, very peaceful looking. It's very sculptural. But that's probably the thing I'm most proud of. And it's a combination of, I'm proud of the engineers, I'm proud of the manufacturing team. For me, it pushed me to my limits at that time period from a design perspective. And it created something new that the world hadn't seen before.
Do you have a particular type of faucet that you prefer, to be specific?
It's really, to me, you'll see in a lot of my pieces, there's going to be a tie to some kind of vintage something, mm-hmm. whether it's a found object or something, or there'll be a nod to some kind of modern mid-century, something like that. So if you look in that same Odin line, we expanded it last year, and we introduced a new handle to it. And there's a cross handle that's really short, but it's a walnut cross handle, and it's so mid-century modern. And the proportions are, you have a nice tall spout and a really low handle with a cross. And then we did a tall spout with a cross. And to me, like that's me. And typically when people ask me that question about, like, is there something that represents you, that the Odin lineup represents me as a designer, but it's not all I do. That's one of the things I like about what we do is you can't just be the modern designer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You have to be so much more than that. You have to have an appreciation and understanding of all design and all styles, because we're not a team of 100 designers, so it's definitely a challenge, but occasionally it lines up where something you've designed and it's truly you and truly your style, just hits all the right marks and get lucky enough to be produced.
So you never had regrets not to study engineering?
Not for a second. I mean, Judd is a mechanical engineer by trade, and then has a master's in industrial design. Mm-hmm. And it's fun because he really deeply understands engineering, and then he's able to apply that to design. I have an appreciation for engineering. But I think I really didn't know that you could get paid for what we do. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that was a career path. We actually spend a lot of time speaking with local high schools and local schools in general about industrial design, because it's a really unique career path, and not too many people know about it.
Yeah.
Thanks to Apple and some of the car companies, product design has become more popular. Dyson, there's another one, mm-hmm. Has certainly made product design a little bit more to the forefront. Mm-hmm. But I mean, like, I'm just looking around my office, like the way my brain works is everything I'm looking at, I'm like, industrial designer, and I just, like, I geek out all the time about that. It's like, the fact that our team gets to design products that go in people's homes that they use every day, like, talk about what an honor, talk about a cool job. I feel really, really fortunate that not only do I get to do that, but I get to work with great people and passionate people.
I think what's great hearing you speak is that it's quite easy, I think, for consumers to look at what you guys produce and then faucets of other companies and say, I like this one, I like that one. This one looks nice, but I don't know why. Why is this one so much nicer looking? And the answer is probably in this recording. It's all the stuff that goes into it. It's the teamwork, it's the team structure, it's the passion, it's the stories, it's the traveling, it's all of those things. And I suppose that the takeaway would be it takes a lot of work and dedication to do that. I mean, that comes down, and all of that stuff that you talked about gets straddled into, a decision like making the knurling tighter than it typically would be. Like, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's, the dedication to the craft is really what separates us, because I believe that good design is table stakes in everything right now. If you don't have good design, you won't get any consideration. So what are you doing that's different beyond just good design? It has to be elite special design, and then that desire to be masters of your craft.
So talking about industrial design for a bit, because I think the previous thing you said about industrial design maybe being not super well known is interesting, and I would tend to agree with it. I also feel sort of the same way with our own profession, which is architecture. Which is like you were describing when you're in your home, you look at everything. It's like someone designed that, someone designed this. Like, these are opportunities, and we see the same thing like when we're walking around in a city, for example. Like, everyone designed it. Not all of it's great for sure, but someone had their hands in there. And this is a slightly different conversation, but it's a bit peculiar to me. Like, why is it that these professions are not more well known and more in the forefront? Because literally everything, as you pointed out, in the home was designed by someone or some company and manufactured. Like, someone created it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have discussions with my kids a lot. Like, they still can't quite fathom, like, yeah, that faucet, like, I designed it. Like, that's my work. That's what I get paid to do. They still can't quite connect the dots. And I think all the time about, I had two teachers in high school that were just foundational to my development and who I am. And at its core of kind of what we're talking about, to me, is creative problem solving. I think it didn't have a label. It wasn't engineering. It wasn't design. It wasn't math or science. It was creative problem solving. And my belief is that that's really what's going to separate anybody in any field, really, and especially the design field of any design. If you're able to creatively problem solve, like, that's what makes you unique. That's how you can differentiate yourself. That's how you're going to innovate. That's how you can solve problems. That's how you can bring beautiful objects into our world. And, to me, that's what makes my job special, for sure.
Is the term creative problem solving something that's used in industrial design education and the profession to describe, like, what it is you're doing?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't know that in school that ever dawned on me, or I ever heard that. But to me, that's really at its core what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Because if we're just designing stuff to sell, like, what are we doing? Like, that's so wasteful. It's so, especially now, like, as we're starting to think about, I know that's the dilemma from a lot of product designers is, am I just adding to waste? Am I just adding to some of the issues that we have holistically? And to me, you're not if we're solving some of those unmet needs. Like, if we're also thinking about sustainability and water usage from my perspective, and end of life, and are things recyclable, reusable, sustainable, all that. To me, that's what makes a special designer. And to me, it's more than just being a good designer. You have to be a creative problem solver.
That's such a fascinating way to describe it, and I would agree with that. It's interesting because I asked that question partially because in architecture, if people ask an architect, most architects, like, what do you do? A fairly common answer would be, I solve problems. And it's an interesting response on the one hand, because I think most people, it's a very basic response. Like, okay, what do you mean you solve problems? Like, the technical things is what you're talking about. But the creative problem solving, as you described it in that term, is what they really mean, which is, I like thinking about design that way because it doesn't limit the solution or the scope or it doesn't limit the question, right? It just means it describes a process and a desire to do good. But whatever's required to make that happen is what's going to happen. And that, therefore bleeds into all the things you just mentioned. This is great.
Yep. Very true.
Well, I think we covered a lot, and this was a fantastic conversation, and I'm glad at the end we got to talk a little bit about industrial design and the broader scope as well. I think what you guys are doing is great. We've said that before. We truly mean it, and it was a pleasure having you on the show.
Well, I appreciate it. That, like I've said before, anytime I get to talk design, it's a great day. And I'm honored to be a part of this. And I love sharing our story, and I'm very proud of Brizo and what we've done. And I can't wait to be a part of the next few years of what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what's around the corner.
Yeah, you have to release that futuristic faucet.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode. A reminder that the raffle's still going on, so if you want to support the show and also potentially win a book, then leave a review of us in the Apple Podcast app. The book, again, is The Architect's Studio Companion. That's a legit prize, We're slowly getting up to the car. Soon, I think we're going to be a car maybe like the next,
to the car.
Maybe like 18 months.
Well, we can give away a car. We don't have to say if it's functioning and how big it is.
It's an NFT car.
It's a Lego car.
What else? You can find us on all the social medias. Of course, the show's on iTunes. It's on Spotify as well, where you can rate the show. I don't think you can leave a review, but you can rate the show at least.
You can subscribe to, I think.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we're on YouTube for the interviews and some of the heftier episodes.
Yeah. And of course, there is always the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can text message or leave a voicemail. Anything you want to share with us, feel free to reach out.
And we have a website, which is secondstudiopod.com. All of our stuff is on there. Email is hello@secondstudiopod. Look, that's a lot of ways to get a hold of us. We're out there. We're in the universe. Turn around. We're there. Hi.
We're everywhere.
And thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. It means a lot to us, and we have a lot of great things planned for the show and some more cool guests coming up, so look forward to that, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.